I'm Nova.
I'm Alloy, and this is AgentStack Daily.
Qwen just put a 2.4 trillion parameter open weight model on OpenRouter. It activates 95 billion parameters for each token instead of firing the entire network, and it can accept 1 million tokens at once. People can now reach the open design behind Qwen's closed max service through a mainstream model router, with enough context capacity for sprawling codebases, document collections, and long agent histories.
Okay, that's actually wild. But what happens after a model reads all that material may matter more. Companies are putting agents into engineering and operations. GitHub is introducing one plugin format across 3 agent clients, and researchers found performance falling by more than half when agents had to reason across multiple sources. Ambition is sprinting, reliability is jogging behind.
Today, you'll hear about Qwen's openweight giant, NIST's effort to modernize the National Vulnerability Database, ChatGPT's official Linux app, and DeepMind putting sign language translation into users' hands.
Plus Grok 4.6, drones that replan while flying, local inference on Apple hardware, and the terminal-based AI coding agent Codex moving into RingCentral's engineering stack.
Qwen 3.8 2.4 TA95B is now listed on OpenRouter, the service that lets developers reach models from multiple providers through one API. The listing describes an open-weight sparse mixture of experts model with 2.4 trillion total parameters, 95 billion active for each token, and a 1 million token context window. Sparse mixture of experts means a request activates selected parts of the model instead of all its weights at once. That doesn't make the model small. 95 billion active parameters is still enormous, but it changes the computing economics compared with running all 2.4 trillion for every token. The context capacity can hold large document sets, code, or agent histories in one request. Capacity alone, of course, doesn't prove the model will notice every buried instruction or connect distant details correctly. It tells us how much can enter, not how well the model reasons over all of it. The combination is unusual: huge total capacity, a smaller active slice, and a long input window.
And the open-weight distinction matters more than the gigantic number on the label. Qwen identifies this as the open-weight variant of Qwen 3.8 Max, whose hosted service remains closed inside Qwen's own API. Organizations able to operate the weights, or buy access from a third-party host, can use the open design instead of depending exclusively on Qwen's endpoint. OpenRouter makes it immediately reachable without pretending that API access is equivalent to operating a 2.4 trillion parameter system yourself. There's no detailed changelog or behavior report attached to the listing, so we don't have grounded claims about coding quality, tool use, speed, or reliability. I'm not granting it magical repository understanding because the context number has 6 zeros. But a 1 million token, 95 billion active open model entering a mainstream routing catalog is substantial. Open models aren't confined to compact alternatives anymore. They're arriving at a scale that gives independent hosts, inference companies, and organizations with demanding data controls something much larger to build around. NIST is asking the public how to modernize the National Vulnerability Database. Is this an actual rebuild, or the government announcing that it would like ideas about a rebuild?
The second one, very clearly. NIST published a formal request for information in the Federal Register on August 12 under docket NIST 2026-0100. It asks organizations and individuals to describe priorities, opportunities, and challenges across 5 areas: scalability, automation, interoperability, transparency, and utility. The National Vulnerability Database is the U.S. government's standards-based repository for vulnerability information. Security products and teams consume its structured records to identify affected software, assess severity, and connect public vulnerability disclosures with internal systems. NIST says artificial intelligence and machine-readable security data are reshaping vulnerability management, which is why it's gathering input. No selected architecture appears in the notice, and no database behavior has changed. This is consultation before implementation, not implementation dressed in ceremonial language.
Good distinction, because vulnerability records feed patching and risk decisions across a huge software supply chain. Automation could help NIST process information at scale, and better interoperability could make records easier for security products to consume. But if AI starts classifying, enriching, or linking reports, transparency becomes even more important. One plausible-looking error can spread through downstream tools that treat government data as authoritative. The same applies when records are delayed, incomplete, or inconsistent. Machine-readable data can distribute a weakness as efficiently as it distributes a correction. Comments close October 13, 2026, giving vendors, researchers, maintainers, and security teams a dated chance to contribute evidence to the public record. NIST has picked the right categories of questions. It hasn't answered them yet, and I'd worry if the consultation were mistaken for proof that a modernized system already exists.
OpenAI has released an official ChatGPT desktop application for Linux, closing a conspicuous gap after supporting other major desktop operating systems. Linux users previously relied on the browser or unofficial community packages. They now have a first-party installation path distributed through OpenAI's Codex page. The launch drew immediate developer attention. Its Hacker News discussion reached 141 points shortly after publication, and technology outlets picked up the release. That response isn't surprising. Linux is disproportionately common among developers, researchers, infrastructure teams, and people running local AI systems, the crowd most likely to keep an assistant beside a terminal for hours.
Exactly, and official packaging sounds dull until you've spent time deciding whether an unofficial desktop wrapper deserves access to your conversations. Does the announcement say whether Linux gets complete feature parity with the macOS and Windows clients?
Not in the supplied release material. We have the official application and distribution path, not a detailed matrix covering every desktop capability. We also don't know whether future Linux updates will arrive in lockstep with the other clients. The firm claim is pleasantly boring. Linux users can install OpenAI's own ChatGPT desktop client instead of wrapping the web app or trusting a community package. No interpretive dance required. That first-party route also makes product ownership clearer. OpenAI, rather than a third-party packager, is responsible for the application being offered.
Boring platform parity can be excellent product news. It establishes a supported relationship with Linux users and puts ChatGPT closer to development work already happening on those machines, although the announcement doesn't establish deep operating system integration. If Linux receives new desktop capabilities alongside the other platforms, this is genuine parity. If it trails, it becomes the cousin who hears about the family gathering afterward. Either way, an official client removes one long-running obstacle, and 141 points of early discussion suggests plenty of people had noticed the omission. Jensen Huang has topped Glassdoor's 2026 Best CEOs ranking with 99% employee approval. That's remarkable internal sentiment for the leader of a company sitting at the center of the AI infrastructure boom, where expectations are hardly known for being gentle.
Glassdoor's methodology makes the number interesting. The ranking draws from anonymous employee reviews rather than analyst forecasts, stock performance, or a panel admiring NVIDIA's market position. Employees are reporting on leadership from inside the company. A 99% approval score doesn't mean every worker agrees with every decision, and it isn't an independent audit of culture or working conditions. It does mean the employee reviewers included in the ranking overwhelmingly approved of Huang's leadership during the measurement period. That's a different kind of evidence from NVIDIA's share price or demand for its chips.
And it lands differently in AI than a generic executive award. NVIDIA competes not only for customers but for scarce researchers, engineers, software partners, and startups deciding where to build. Strong employee approval can reinforce recruiting and retention while the company expands across chips, systems, models, and developer software. I'd still separate approval from strategy. Employees liking a CEO doesn't prove every technical bet will work or every customer relationship will remain strong. But 99% is hard to wave away as ordinary executive popularity.
Right, it's a workforce signal, not a GPU benchmark. Huang's founder status and long tenure also make the result notable. He isn't a newly installed executive enjoying a brief honeymoon, He has led NVIDIA through multiple eras and now through explosive AI demand. Glassdoor captures reported confidence at one moment, while markets capture something else entirely. Whether he holds the top position next year will reveal how that confidence survives another year of rapid growth, talent competition, and relentless expectations. Number 1 is impressive. Staying there while the company scales may be harder. IBM Research's VACRA benchmark tested frontier and open-weight models against more than 8,000 real APIs spanning 62 domains. Performance fell by more than half when tasks required reasoning across multiple sources instead of making a single-step tool call. The surprising part is where agents broke. Models often selected and called the correct API, then failed during the language reasoning around it, identifying which company a user meant, connecting information across documents, or grounding an answer in the correct source.
Oof, that directly tempers the enterprise execution story coming later. An agent can look competent because every individual tool fires correctly while its overall conclusion is wrong. Policy-sensitive questions were worse too. Accuracy collapsed on requests the agent should have refused. Single-system tasks may already be useful, but work crossing internal documents, live business applications, and policy boundaries remains fragile. Human oversight isn't ceremonial there, it catches mistakes that successful tool logs won't reveal. Grok 4.6 arrived with XAI calling it a significant entrant in the AI teammate category. That phrase implies software working alongside people over sustained tasks rather than simply returning one answer. The announcement also reached 553 points on Hacker News after latent space surfaced it, so interest clearly wasn't the scarce resource. What did XAI actually document behind the teammate framing?
Very little in the announcement provided here. XAI named Grok 4.6 and supplied the broad positioning, but it didn't publish a changelog, benchmark results, or a concrete feature list alongside it. We can't infer stronger reasoning, better tool use, longer context, new deployment options, or compatibility changes from the number. The product announcement is real, the behavioral difference isn't documented in the source. Even the teammate label leaves unanswered what kind of sustained work the model can perform, how it handles corrections, or whether it can act across tools reliably.
Yeah, I'm excited by assistants becoming collaborators, but I don't buy that label without evidence showing sustained work, correction, and dependable action. The 553-point discussion measures curiosity, not capability. Compared with Qwen's listing, where we at least have parameter activation and context specifications, Grok 4.6 arrives with much less technical substance. XAI could change that by publishing detailed release notes or measured results. Until then, AI Teammate is positioning attached to a newly announced model, not a demonstrated operating profile. Pretending otherwise would turn a product name into fan fiction.
Dreamfly gives an aerial drone a rolling navigation loop. Observe the scene, plan a few steps ahead, decide whether it has reached the destination, and replan when the view changes. That differs from committing to one complete route before flight. On a public navigation benchmark, Dreamfly beat earlier methods and completed about 29% of tasks in environments absent from its training data.
Okay, 29% isn't autonomous drone victory music, but the unseen environment result is genuinely interesting. A rescue coordinator might describe a destination using visible landmarks, past a damaged chimney, behind a colored roof, without supplying a perfect map. The drone must connect language with a changing camera view and revise its movement as new details appear.
And that's where it echoes IBM's agent benchmark. Correct individual actions aren't enough if meaning gets lost between steps. Dreamfly improves that continuity in physical navigation.
Still, 29% means most unfamiliar tasks remain unsolved. The work leads prior methods, while leaving plenty of air between a research result and dependable rescue deployment.
GitHub published Agent Plugins 1.0 on August 6 and posted the changelog on August 12. A plugin built in the new format can work across VS Code, the terminal-based coding agent Copilot CLI, and the Copilot app. A tool maker might otherwise maintain separate integrations for editor, terminal, and application surfaces. GitHub's promise is one package across compatible agent clients. Developers don't stay inside one interface. They inspect code in an editor, issue commands in a terminal, and move into broader assistant experiences for planning or collaboration.
Finally, some unification while agent ecosystems multiply. But one plugin can conceal three very different environments. Does GitHub document the permission model or exact authoring mechanics in the announcement?
Not in the supplied changelog. It establishes cross-client compatibility and names 5 launch partners: AWS, AnySphere, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Versal, but doesn't give enough detail here to characterize permissions or implementation. Those partner names are meaningful. Each company operates agent products, developer platforms, or both, which suggests GitHub wants the format to reach beyond an extension system maintained only for its own software. The announcement supports the shared package claim. It doesn't support assumptions about what a plugin may access, how credentials are handled, or whether every capability behaves identically in all 3 clients.
The first partner plugins will make the promise tangible. A shared format can reduce duplicated packaging and let one capability follow a developer from editor to terminal to Copilot's app. It can also concentrate expectations around GitHub's compatibility rules, so the omitted details will matter once plugins touch files, tools, credentials, or remote services. GitHub considers the format ready as a product. The launch catalog will show whether it becomes a genuine cross-client layer or merely 3 GitHub surfaces sharing a name. I'm optimistic, but interoperability becomes real only when independently built plugins cross those boundaries cleanly.
OpenAI's enterprise study says a small group of leading companies is moving beyond AI assistance and into execution. Instead of asking a chatbot for a draft or recommendation, these firms are embedding agentic systems, software that plans and performs multi-step tasks, into real business workflows using products including ChatGPT and Codex. OpenAI argues that these frontier firms are pulling ahead while much of the market is still establishing basic adoption. That changes what companies are buying. A useful answer is no longer the finish line, completed work is. The distinction matters in ordinary business terms. Assistance produces something a person may use, while execution changes a record, advances a process, writes software, or coordinates several steps toward an outcome.
That's consequential, but OpenAI produced the study and sells the tools, so I'd treat the conclusion as a vendor's account of adoption rather than a neutral census. The company's framing still tells us where enterprise demand is moving, away from a separate chat window and towards systems allowed to perform steps inside business processes. And IBM's result complicates the victory lap. Performance dropped by more than half when agents had to reason across multiple sources, the exact point where enterprise work gets messy. Companies can pursue autonomous execution while still discovering that a clean demonstration doesn't survive ambiguous names, conflicting documents, policy boundaries, and several connected systems. OpenAI says leading firms are moving faster by embedding agents into work. The study doesn't establish how reliably those agents handle every cross-system task. Execution is the commercial destination. Dependable execution remains the technical contest. RingCentral gives that execution push a named customer. OpenAI's August 12 case study says the cloud communications company is using ChatGPT work and the terminal-based AI coding agent Codex across engineering and operations. How much measurable impact does the case study disclose?
OpenAI says RingCentral is using the products to accelerate AI product development and centralize operational intelligence, but the case study doesn't provide concrete productivity numbers, integration depth, or a detailed account of which tasks run autonomously. ChatGPT work serves as the general work surface, while Codex focuses on coding. RingCentral is placing both into major functions rather than buying one undifferentiated assistant and claiming it fits everyone equally.
Honestly, that twin tool approach is more believable. Engineers and operations staff can share an organizational AI layer while still using a specialized coding agent where software work demands it. It resembles the portfolio model companies already use for databases, analytics, and communications, shared infrastructure with role-specific products on top. Yet this remains a customer story published by the vendor. It proves that a large software company adopted the tools. It doesn't prove the return on that adoption, And it doesn't tell us whether the systems merely assist people or complete meaningful work independently.
Exactly. The useful development is organizational, not numerical. AI procurement is starting to span departments, broad assistance for daily work, specialized agents for code, and some common company-level approach around both. RingCentral's account leaves open whether that produces faster releases, fewer incidents, lower operating cost, or better internal decisions. Those outcomes would determine whether the pattern is durable. It also leaves the depth of centralized operational intelligence undefined, that could range from finding information more quickly to participating directly in operational processes. For now, the named use of ChatGPT work and Codex shows enterprise AI expanding beyond isolated pilots, while the missing measurements keep the confetti safely in storage. DeepMind published SL2T on August 12, describing a sign language-to-text model intended for deaf and hard-of-hearing users. Signed input becomes written text, and DeepMind says the model powers new sign language features shipping to real users rather than remaining a research demonstration. That user-first framing is the concrete change. Accessibility leads the announcement instead of appearing as a secondary example attached to a general model.
That's exciting, with a serious qualification. Sign languages aren't interchangeable visual encodings of spoken languages. Each has its own grammar, vocabulary, and community. Which sign languages does SL2T support, and where can people actually access it?
DeepMind hasn't specified that in the supplied material. It also hasn't named the product surface, said whether outside developers will receive an API, or detailed supported devices and deployment regions. Those omissions sharply limit what we can say about reach. Shipping to real users is stronger than shown in a lab, but it doesn't establish broad availability or reliable translation across different signing styles, camera conditions, backgrounds, or languages. The announcement supports the model's purpose and user-facing direction, not a universal capability claim.
Even so, putting an accessibility model in front of the community it's meant to serve can reveal problems that benchmark work alone won't capture. Real communication includes regional variation, personal signing style, imperfect framing, interruptions, facial expression, and context that may not be visible in one gesture. Errors also carry human consequences. A mistaken translation can obstruct a conversation rather than merely produce an awkward paragraph. DeepMind has made sign language the headline product, which deserves attention. Now the disclosure needs to become specific: supported languages, product location, user access, and whether developers can integrate the capability elsewhere. The human stakes are too high for sign language to remain one broad label.
Llama.cpp drew a 352-point Hacker News discussion around a headline pointing to Llama.app. The available source provides no supported specifications, release notes, benchmark results, or compatibility details, so there isn't a substantive technical change we can establish beyond the attention around the project. That restraint matters because Llama.cpp sits at the center of a great deal of local model work. Its name can invite people to project every recent improvement in local inference onto a single thin headline.
Yeah, popularity can't fill those blanks. Llama.cpp is widely associated with running models locally across varied hardware, which explains why a related item can attract hundreds of points quickly. Local inference gives people the option to keep model weights and prompts on machines they control, subject to the model and setup they choose, and the project has become a recognizable part of that ecosystem. But this source doesn't support claims about new speed, hardware acceleration, interfaces, model compatibility, or deployment behavior. The discussion score tells us the local model community was interested. It doesn't tell us what changed under the hood. A 352-point conversation is evidence of attention, not a changelog wearing a crowd. A separate item about faster Llama.cpp inference on Apple Silicon and inside macOS virtual machines reached 303 points on Hacker News. That headline connects two increasingly important use cases: running local models efficiently on Apple hardware and preserving performance when the workload sits inside a virtualized macOS environment. But faster without a number always makes me reach for the missing footnote. What measurements do we actually have?
None in the supplied source. It's headline only, so we don't have hardware configurations, model sizes, software settings, baselines, or implementation details. We can say the work concerns llama.cpp inference on Apple Silicon and macOS virtual machines, and that it attracted substantial technical interest. We can't state a percentage improvement, claim near-native speed, or attribute the result to a specific optimization. Different Apple chips, memory sizes, model formats, and virtual machine configurations could produce very different outcomes, and the headline doesn't resolve any of that. The title points toward a useful capability but doesn't quantify it. The 303-point discussion tells us developers care about the combination of Apple Silicon, virtualization, and local models. It doesn't tell us whether the change cuts latency slightly or transforms the workload. Compared with the Qwen listing, where specifications are explicit, this item is all direction and no ruler. Interesting direction, yes. Measured improvement, not from the evidence we have.
macOS virtual machines can isolate development environments, reproduce software setups, or support hosted Mac infrastructure. AI development inside those environments becomes much more useful if local inference doesn't suffer a severe performance penalty. A team could keep a model close to source code and tools while preserving separation between projects or customers. That's the appealing destination, not a result established by the source. The distinction is important because virtualization adds another software layer between a model and the hardware, and developers will care whether that layer creates a small tax or a prohibitive one.
Google has announced new AI and agent-style experiences across Google Ads and Google Analytics, presenting them as ways to simplify marketing work. That puts AI on both sides of a campaign, creating or managing advertising activity, then understanding performance through analytics. The supplied source supports that product direction but doesn't provide enough detail here to name exact features, interfaces, rollout regions, or measured outcomes. It also doesn't establish which actions happen automatically and which remain suggestions requiring approval.
The pairing is still worth watching because ads and analytics form a natural action and feedback loop. One system contains campaign controls, the other contains performance information. Software that connects the two could reduce the manual work of interpreting results and carrying decisions back into campaign management. But Agentic is doing a lot of labor in the announcement. Without documented actions, approval boundaries, or performance data, we can't tell whether these experiences explain information, prepare changes, or independently execute them.
Right now, the grounded claim is narrower. Google is adding AI experiences to both products to simplify marketing workflows. We don't have evidence that the tools autonomously change budgets, launch campaigns, replace creative, or optimize targeting without human confirmation. Those would be materially different capabilities, especially when each action can spend money or affect customers. The source doesn't establish them, so broad autonomy claims would be advertising on behalf of the advertising platform. Nobody asked for that.
Still, it builds on OpenAI's enterprise argument. Major software vendors are moving AI into products where work and data already live. Google's advantage is distribution. Marketers already use ads to act and analytics to understand outcomes. If the new experiences connect those surfaces carefully, they could shorten the distance between observation and decision. If they merely add conversational summaries, the change is more modest. The announcement establishes integrated marketing assistance. The actual level of agency remains unanswered.
HKUDS's nanobot leads this group with 46,928 stars. Release 0.3 shipped July 25, and the repository was updated August 13. It's a lightweight, self-hosted Python agent framework with a web interface, tools, memory, multi-agent workflows, automation, chat integrations, and MCP support. MCP, or Model Context Protocol, is a common way for AI applications to connect with external tools and data. Nanobot supplies the agent layer, the other two projects help build and feed the tool layer beneath it.
Right, Codebase Memory MCP and Fast MCP fit together neatly. Codebase Memory reached 38,763 stars after gaining 7,909 in a month, a jump of about 26%, and release 0.10 arrived August 13. It turns code into a persistent knowledge graph across 158 languages. Its millisecond indexing, sub-millisecond query, and 99% token reduction figures are project claims. Fast MCP, at release 3.4 and 27,202 stars, offers a Python-focused way to build MCP servers and clients.
So one project runs agents, one gives them structured memory about code, and one helps expose tools through a shared protocol. That connected stack explains the traction better than 3 isolated star counts. Repositories can become popular before they prove dependable in production, but developers are clearly converging on reusable connections between agents and real systems rather than rebuilding every integration inside every assistant.
Qwen 3.82.4TA95B is the heavyweight arrival, an open-weight sparse mixture of experts model with 95 billion active parameters out of 2.4 trillion total and a 1 million token context window. OpenRouter provides API access, while the open weights leave room for other hosts. The listing identifies it as the open counterpart to Qwen 3.8 Max but supplies little behavioral evidence beyond those specifications.
DeepSeek v4 Pro 0813 also landed on OpenRouter as the general availability release of DeepSeek v4 Pro. It's a large mixture of experts model with a 1,048,576 token context window, slightly more than 1 million tokens. The listing makes it reachable through an API, but the supplied description doesn't disclose active or total parameter counts, benchmarks, or a detailed changelog. The concrete news is general availability and unusually long context. Muse Glimmer 30B is trending on Hugging Face as an open image and text model that produces text. Its page shows 1,352 likes and 121,042 downloads. It uses Sapphire Tensor's weights, works with the Transformers ecosystem, carries an Apache 2.0 license tag, and includes evaluation results. It's also described as conversational, so its intended use goes beyond one-shot image labeling.
Nice, independent hosts can combine pictures and written instructions for document understanding, screenshot analysis, visual questions, and conversations grounded in images. The listing doesn't establish context length, hardware needs, or benchmark performance, and 30 billion parameters doesn't tell us how comfortably it runs on a particular device. What it does show is strong interest in downloadable vision language weights with common tooling and permissive licensing. From assistance to execution, how enterprises put AI to work argues that leading companies are moving agents into real workflows. Daybreak models are now available on AWS carries that push into cybersecurity through Amazon Bedrock, supporting enterprise security work through a cloud service companies may already use. Together, they put general execution and specialized security inside established purchasing channels, though both accounts come from OpenAI.
And MAI Code 1.1 Flash available in GitHub Copilot adds Microsoft's latest small-tier coding model to Copilot. It adds native vision for understanding images and claims improved coding quality. That could connect screenshots or interface images with source code, but GitHub documents the rollout while independent comparisons still have to establish the practical gain. For supporting sources, model pages, research papers, and additional details, look at the show notes at tobyonfitnesstech.com.
Thanks for listening to AgentStack Daily. We'll be back soon.